Well. Who knew that regulation was so popular? So good to see all of you here. A few of the panelists tried to walk away. I said, no, we got to actually do this. First of all, thank you so much. Just by looking at these faces, you know many of them are OG of OG in this space. And we're going to have a good conversation over the next 45 minutes. Well, I'm going to start off with the most significant thing that, unless you were sleeping under a rock yesterday, that happened. So I want to start with the US. It was a very easy target for many complaints and laggard regulatory uncertainty, et cetera, et cetera. I want to ask both Nilmini and Ari to kick us off on their thoughts, because they're both based in Washington, D.C., and live, breathe, eat, figuratively, much of this. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Sandra, and thank you all. I'm delighted to be here with you. The U.S. was very easy to complain about because there were so many things going wrong. The Biden administration was hostile to crypto technology and had an SEC chairman, or still has, who was seen as doing regulation by enforcement, kind of imposing rules as he saw fit, but without consistency and without warning to the industry. In addition, the administration had people at the Treasury Department, who I'll give you an example. At the Blockchain Association event, they said that the Deputy Secretary of Treasury came to it and said, our industry was a threat to national security. So this led to a lot of fear in the industry about innovation. At the SEC, there are Republicans and Democrats that serve on the commission, and last week, Hester Pierce, one of the Republican commissioners, talked about how it stifled innovation in the U.S. around tokenization, and that led to people moving their work to other countries, including to places like Singapore. We're going to see with the new Trump administration a real shift in their view of crypto technology, an openness to it. He's been very clear on the campaign that he's more supportive of this. So we're expecting to see someone at the SEC that will be very different than Gary Gensler, someone at the Treasury that will be more open to this, and hopefully this plus the changes in the Congress will lead to an opportunity for legislation to be passed that will allow for a clear framework for this type of fintech, the crypto technology.
Yeah, I think all really great points. I'm Ari Redbord. I'm the global head of policy at TRM Labs. We're a blockchain intelligence company. Prior to joining TRM, I worked in 3 different presidential administrations: the Bush administration, the Obama administration, and the Trump administration. And I'll tell you that there's always a lot of excitement around elections and campaigns. And we'll ultimately see. I think I'm still very much digesting what happened yesterday, and a lot of the promises that are made on the campaign trail aren't necessarily what we see end up as policy. And I think we're still a really long road to getting where we need to go. 2 really quick takes on the election. I think first, the presidency. What we could see pretty quickly, and Nilmini got into this a little bit, is a little less enforcement. We've been seeing a lot of enforcement actions end up in the courts in the United States, whether it's the SEC or the CFTC or other agencies. I think we could see less of that, and that could potentially really help crypto businesses in the short term get a little bit more clarity on allowing them to operate. And I think 2 is a little longer term piece, and that's the legislative piece, which is really, really how we're going to get legal clarity in the United States. And with the Republicans now controlling both houses of Congress, we could see a stablecoins bill happen a little more quickly than we would have otherwise. We can see a market structure bill, which happen a little bit more quickly. But remember, that only gets us to the point where we are today in Singapore, with a regime about how we're going to regulate digital assets. So I think we're still a little bit behind, but I am hopeful that we can get to a good place over the next several months.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Ari. We should not get ahead of ourselves that all of a sudden all the promises are going to be fulfilled overnight. However, there is a certain amount of, I would say, reasonable optimism that can be shared that some of the blockers may finally be unblocked. Antonio, Crypto.com has done so well in the US despite all of the current 2024 challenges. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts and how Crypto.com is doing so well?
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I'm Antonio Alvarez. I'm the Chief Compliance Officer for Crypto.com. We're exchange and a crypto business headquartered here in Singapore, but operating globally. We've had a good run in the US and in most of the countries where we operate because we are a compliance-first exchange. Is there a... Okay, let's try. Oh, much better. Thank you. We're a compliance-first exchange. We try to work, and we work very closely with regulators around the world. And in the U.S., we've taken that approach. The U.S., as crazy, as diverse as it is, as chaotic as it is, which is what I believe actually empowers the bold innovation and the risk-taking in the U.S., has a huge diversity of regulators. Right? We always hear most about the aggressive ones, the SEC, particularly, or the New York DFS, right? The ones that are out there trying to stifle innovation. We work very closely with the CFTC very well. We're licensed with the CFTC. We work closely with all the MTL state level regulators. So there's a lot of appetite, even within the US, at a regulatory level, to work with industry to understand the products and to power and enable the innovation that we bring into the market.
How is this mic? I'm going to attempt to use it. Let me know if the sound quality sucks. I will stop using it. Dr. Pavasant, you are the one regulator from SEC Thailand on our panel. I would love if you could, talk a little bit about SEC Thailand for those who are not quite as familiar. What is your mandate, and how do you see the regulatory landscape from your perspective?
All right. Okay. For Thailand, as you know that we have specific law governing the digital asset as well as the crypto assets, including the tokenization and the providing service of the digital asset. And this year, we introduced the regulation, and we're focusing on the tokenization because we support the use of technology in the capital markets. And recently, we introduced the specific regulation on the green token, that the tokenization of the green project or sustainability project can be in the form of investment token, where the token holder receive revenue sharing from the green project when it's success. Or it can be the tokenization of the green product itself, like the tokenization of the carbon credit or the renewable energy certificate. And such green project must be reviewed by the qualified reviewer. And as we have specific law on this digital asset, we have some use case on the tokenization of the real world asset. And this year, some real-world asset tokenization can be offered through the shelf filing scheme, such as the tokenization of the movies or the music. It means that the issuer can offer the multiple issues of the token with single approval. This will lead to the cost effectiveness of the issuer and in line with the characteristic of the product. And actually for the security side, because we have separate law of the crypto asset and security, now we see that traditional player increasingly interested in the tokenization, and the tokenization of the security will fall under the security law. Actually, in 2021, we have 4 issues of digital bond issued under the sandbox scheme. And this year, we are in the process of amend our security law to accommodate the electronic security. This to ensure the legal effect and enforceability of the security in the electronic form. And finally, for the payment and stablecoin, when talk about payment tokens, stablecoin, some company, particularly in the banking group, are interested in the tokenization for payment and settlement. And for Thailand, the regulator of the money market is the Bank of Thailand. And as SEC, we the regulator of capital market, we work closely with the Bank of Thailand in that matter. Recently, the Bank of Thailand introduced the regulatory sandbox on the programmable payment. And some activity under the programmable payment may fall under the digital asset service, such as broker, dealer, or custodian service provider. That's why the SEC Thailand also provide the sandbox scheme for all types of digital asset. And for this sandbox scheme, we cooperate with the Bank of Thailand to provide one-stop consultation to the participant whose their activity may fall under the programmable payment and in the digital asset service under the scope of SEC.
So basically, the regulators in Thailand have done very little this year. I'm kidding. You have done a lot this year. Thank you so much for that. I want to take a poll question here. Just raise your hands if you're brave. How many of you have either a crypto-related business or are active in crypto in Southeast Asia, so Singapore, Thailand, etc.? Raise your hands. How many are you involved in a crypto-related? I've got a few hands. The audience. Few hands. Okay. Winston, you are a major player in this ecosystem here, extending not only into Singapore but also to Japan. Tell us, how do you see the world?
Okay, let me try to answer this question in 2 steps. Step number 1, when we're issuing a security token, and that's the area that I focus on, tokenizing real-world assets and securities. And when you take a traditional asset, you put it on a blockchain, the legal framework and construct exists. For example, we will follow the securities law. And as such, under common law, we treat all security tokens under the Securities Act. And it is pretty straightforward until you get into alternative asset space. So in the last 12 months, we have been building a project to essentially build one common product. It's an alternative to be able to be launched in Zurich, Thailand, and Singapore simultaneously, following which, on phase 2, we would like to think about Japan, Korea, and perhaps Hong Kong. So this is very complex because it's never about the operational rails. We take 2 months to draw up the schematics and the boxes and arrows, but it's taking us over a year to get the legal framework in place. The alternative product that we're building is based on Swiss DLT law. My client wanted the legal framework to be at the highest order, and presently, legislation on the DLT law is the clearest for us. Second, the collateral that we're holding, it's in a French warehouse. We have to employ French law for the collateral. Then when we take the product back to Singapore, of course, that's the easy part. Under the Securities Act, we're cool with that. I then want to sell the product in Thailand, which I've consulted the Thai SEC, who have actually, in truest form, the most accommodating, most progressive, and we are working out to make sure that we can do this in a very compliant manner. So to answer the question, if it's in a traditional form, I think most of the legal framework and construct exists. We just have to make reference. But there's a lot of focus on RWA, and RWA in terms of projects like we want to do music IP, movie IP, literature, and then we have other alternatives like collectibles and so forth. That framework is still very gray, right? We take one of these products, the same product that we're launching in Europe, we get an ISIN literally for the product, and it's considered a security. But in other parts of the world, it may be considered something else, right?
Yep.
So that's where we have to adjust, negotiate, and come to some common understanding. It's complex. With reference to Japan, in the last version of Singapore FinTech Festival, we did a deal that was really interesting. We got FINMA, MES, and JFSA involved, where we issued a security to UBS. We transferred that security to Singapore to DBS, where they purchased the bond, and we repurchased the bond. We re-put the bond out to Shinsei Bank, our bank in Japan, at which time it was done, settled atomically, all on native form public chain. The JFSA was able to rubber stamp that deal as a one-off. And then the next step after a POC is to think about how you want to commercialize your whole effort. That's where the point of doing a POC is once you've proven the concept. But in Japan, there are a handful of tokenization platforms, and they all work on a private chain. So that's, again, if I want to bring something in a tokenized form where I can show the true value, the savings that comes with tokenizing an asset, and we've been able to prove that. Issue a bond in a hybrid fashion versus issue a bond in a native fashion, we can quantify the actual savings. So investors should buy the tokenized bond, but perhaps regulations are not prepared yet to be able to accept something in a public chain format. We are progressing, and it's been very promising. Regulators are learning together with practitioners, and it's just been amazing. The adoption this year has been very, very encouraging.
So we are on our way. Maybe we have not peaked yet, but we're heading upwards. Antonio, what's your view about Singapore and generally the region? Do you share a lot of the same views as Winston?
I do. I think that in the region, in the regulators, in the regulator space around the region, we've seen a lot of the negative emotion kind of come down a little. Regulators are starting to understand the benefits that can come from the innovation and not just be so reluctant based on the negative consequence or the negative impacts that it may have. We've seen regulators like Hong Kong now with a licensing framework with a Hong Kong stablecoin.
Yeah.
Right, Hong Kong dollar stablecoin. We see Korea opening up. We're the first global exchange to be operating locally in Korea.
Yeah.
Before us, it was only Korean exchanges that were able to open up. So it's starting to open up. In Singapore, MAS has been incredibly open with consultation papers, with new licensing frameworks around issuance, around custody, trying to be ahead and in time with the market, with the operators, on what are they need and how to do it so it flourishes. So it's not just a paper exercise, so it actually empowers the business to grow. So it's been very good to be here in Singapore.
This is good to hear, and I had a panel yesterday. We've decided we're going to make no POC t-shirts. No more POCs. I'm kidding. There's value to POCs, but we are now heading into production, ramping up, scaling. Ari, you guys are international. I know you're based in DC, but you've got colleagues like Angela here in the region. What are you seeing? Where is Angela? There you are. What are you seeing globally that makes you think we are getting to that positive momentum?
Yeah, this might not entirely answer that question, but as I've been sitting here thinking about listening to some of the conversation about some of the really complex issues in our space, right? Are these securities? Should they be regulated as securities? Are they commodities? How should we think about payments, tokenized real-world assets? At TRM, we work on anti-money laundering. Yeah. We try to stop bad actors from engaging with the financial system. This is actually one of the easy areas. The Financial Action Task Force has standards, right, for VASPs. If you're a virtual asset service provider anywhere in the world, you're Crypto.com, you're using tools like TRM, you have compliance professionals, you're filing suspicious activity reports, you're working with regulators. And it's the one area where we actually do have standards across the world today. There are gaps, there are certainly gaps, but to me, if we're looking for a model to how we should think about potentially, we're never going to have global regulation. We've never had global regulation on anything, but we could have consistent standards across jurisdiction, and AML today is as close to that as we have. So when we go jurisdiction by jurisdiction, like we're doing here, this is actually the one area where we could probably find some significant consistencies.
Excellent point. Thanks for raising that. I mean, let's go back to the U.S. because there have been challenges in 2024. Could you talk us through, I think you guys have done so much great work at Hedera with your council and the projects that you're working on, especially also going into AI. What gets unlocked next year? Like, what are you most excited about? Maybe even talking about your AI project.
Oh, happy to. So I'm Chief Policy Officer at Hedera, and it's a digital ledger technology platform similar to a blockchain, but it's a hash graph. So it goes faster, uses less energy, and is very cost effective. And we're governed by this council of up to 39 companies, and they're leading companies. So right now there's 32, and it includes like Google and IBM and Samsung and Standard Chartered. So it's this wide range of companies, and I have this exciting opportunity to work on policy that affects our industry overall, but with the backing of really established groups. And the things that I'm really excited about are this kind of what I see as a potential for kind of interoperable standards across the world. So they won't be global regulations, as Ari mentioned, but they may be very similar. I totally agree that the FATF, the travel rule, which is that when money goes from one financial institution to another, that certain bits of information like names and addresses go with it. Like implementation of that is something that I'm really excited about because we do have the standard in place, but we just need to like get it done. But one of the uses that I'm most excited about is, as Sandra mentioned, is AI. So Prove AI is a company that is now built on Hedera, and it helps address like one of the big concerns that people have with AI, which is like governance. So if you tokenize the data, it allows you to show the provenance of that data. Where did it come from? It allows you to set the permissions for that data, so who can use it and who can't in the AI. It allows you to develop pricing for that data. It allows you to send micropayments to the owners of that data. Maybe there's copyrighted information that went into the AI. Now you can compensate people for their ownership of the data. And it also, because it's tokenized, it allows you to pull out data that might be biased or incorrect. And I think that that's a really exciting use case for DLT. And there's also another AI that's built on Hedera, Climate GPT, that has very similar model. And I think that I love that our technology can be part of a solution to challenges with other emerging technologies.
Yes, Antonio.
Yeah, I'd love to just to offer a thought here as well as we talk about interoperability and globalization. Crypto is a global product, no question, right? Bitcoin works the same in every country. And from an industry, we're always pushing for standardization, operarization, right?
Yes.
But I'm very conscious, and I bring this up often, that we as an industry have to do better as well at accommodating to the cultural aspects of each country that we operate in, right? Not everywhere privacy is thought the same way. Not everywhere identity is thought about it the same way.
True.
And sometimes as an industry, I have to recognize we push too much the global thought and say, this works globally, so we're going to jam it everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of effort that we have to do internally, and say we need to adapt better to the local environments.
Excellent point. And my next question goes to Dr. Pavasant to talk about consumer protection, which is obviously paramount to the work that you do, but then how do you also encourage that innovation that you want your entrepreneurs to have the space to be able to do? You did mention that obviously you're coordinating with the central bank and many other agencies, but can you talk a little bit more about how are you trying to balance that consumer protection as well as promoting, maybe not promoting, but allowing space for innovation?
Right, because of the function of SEC as the regulator, right? We have both the function on the development and supervision, and investor protection is one of our main duty. However, in security business or even in the crypto asset or digital asset business, we open for the development and innovation. In policy making process, we have to monitor the development of the market and the transaction, and always work closely with the industry that we can understand their practice and their business. And in regulatory making process, the public hearing and consultation are important. This is to be that our aim is to have the proper and practical regulation. And I can use some example, like for the fundraising by the token, we have various set of the rules applied to different kind of the token offer is to in line with their characteristic. And there are also some exemption for some token offers to like the limit scope of investor amount or to sophisticated investor. And in the part of the doing like the digital asset service or the business, normally the service provider must obtain the license and comply with the set of rules and conduct. However, as digital asset like always develop and dynamic, that's why we provide the regulatory sandbox scheme for all types of digital asset business, including the exchange activities, broker, dealer, investment advisor, fund manager, and custodian wallet providers.
Thanks very much for that. Really appreciate the additional detail. Winston, I want to go to you about, it's already been mentioned, we're not going to have a single ledger. We're not going to have like just one set of, I hate to say it, but off-the-shelf regulatory framework. We're going to have a bunch of different things. But where do you see that we do need to try to coalesce around a standard, or where do you see a good example of what maybe the Singaporean or Japanese regulators have done? And also exporting that back out to the rest of the world.
I think to have one common standard, whether it's in tech or in legal, is probably not realistic, right? The area I think we try to accommodate as we build out our platform, in reference to tech, I have an example that we are doing right now. So in the world of tokenized assets, as you can see, there have been so many POCs, people issue one-off bonds, one-off funds, and they prove that they have been able to connect from point A to point B. But no one ever talks about the buy side, the investor. How do we get more investors to participate and then build a proper secondary market so that we can improve liquidity? Nobody talks about that. So I think into the 9th iteration of SFF, this year, we're going to try something different. SBI's background and DNA, we're a venture capital company. And over the years, we've been placing bets into exchanges, liquidity providers, custodians, and so forth, right? But we have invested quite actively into the buy side, security houses and digital asset exchanges. SBI DM will attempt to connect every exchange that we either have a relationship with or we own direct or indirectly. The key here is to be able to find the legal framework to connect one exchange to the other and also transfer the product. The tech, we are agnostic to the blockchain, but the tech is not the difficult part, right? Because there are bridges and there are a lot of smart tech guys out there that can do this today, right? Bridging and so forth. The word interoperability is so abused in our world, but I'll make it simple, right? We're trying to interconnect, right? Now the legal framework to come up with one global standard in the next 5 years is going to be really tough. The US is changing, EU has MiCA, FINMA governs Switzerland. Everybody thinks almost in the same course, but a little bit different. Adjusting for these little differences is something that is very heavy lifting, but we will have to do it. Constant dialogue with regulators, trying to harmonize, another very abused word, right? Harmonize legal constructs and all that to be as consistent as we can. That's the unglamorous, very difficult, very painful process. It takes years, but we have started already. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but the thing is that I think it's hard to have one platform where we are expected to use one common tech and it all aligns to one common regulatory framework like ISDA, something like that. I think we're years away from that. But we cannot wait. We have to start doing something. SBI will reach out and we will take the painful steps in working with regulators and lawyers and different tech platforms to build this framework out. It's not going to be pretty, but I believe in the doing.
So I appreciate you articulating that because I think you're right. Most of us who are in this space agree we are not going to have the picture-perfect global regulatory framework on day one. However, as someone who always likes to think of the world with glass half full, I'd love Ari to talk about some of the work that he's done with the CFTC, the Technical Advisory Committee or Technology Advisory Committee. We at GBBC sit on the Commissioner Caroline Pham's GMAC Digital Asset Market Subcommittee. The reason why these committees, subcommittees are important is because it's public-private collaboration and really deep work and thinking. Ari, can you please speak to some of the work you've done around the tech?
Sure. Thank you. Sandra's talking about, I'm the vice chair of this thing called the CFTC Technology Advisory Committee, which is a public-private partnership. We wrote a paper on DeFi and wrote a paper on AI, but most importantly, and this goes way beyond the CFTC to globally really, is these conversations are critical, right? You know, regulators need the subject matter expertise that comes from the private sector, and the private sector needs to understand how to engage with government. And I think that, like, if you can put these people in the same room and at the same tables as much as possible, I think that will really ultimately bear fruit. I also think there's a lot that the industry can do to help ourselves. And you know, I think part of what we talk about at the CFTC and elsewhere is the importance of use cases. We talk about regulation all the time, and obviously that's the focus of this panel. But regulation is never going to happen if there's not a compelling reason for the technology in the first place. And I spent a lot of time talking about how we can do AML better using blockchain technology, how we can move funds faster for payments. I was at Circle's booth yesterday here, and the entire booth is basically, it's surrounded by use cases, the way that different actors use USDC to move funds for payments, for remittances, Grab. There's a whole thing about how Grab accepts USDC, right? Like, we have to be really, I think, really lean in to the power of the technology, and that starts with these public-private partnerships.
Great. And Nilmini, can you talk a little bit about how you see where we need to come together and or solutions around the standards piece? Like what, you know, I think we are moving towards that in different capacity.
I think that the most useful thing that our industry could do is to use language that everyone else uses.
No jargon? Come on!
In our industry, we love to make up words, but they're words that don't mean the same thing to normal people, and definitely don't mean the same thing to regulators. One example is the word transactions. Transactions are not transactions. At least they're not always financial transactions. And so the work that people are doing on taxonomy, I know Sandra and Ari have been working on this, but the World Economic Forum, you know, different global groups have worked. It's really important that we first start using words that everyone understands. And then second, when we talk to regulators, that we do, you know, very much provide clear examples of what we're trying to say. And then three, we actually tell them what we want. So not to go in and say we don't want these things, but to say, okay, like, look, let's look at Singapore as a model, or Dubai as the model, or let's take out some pieces out of the EU, but to be very clear about what we want to see. But the number one thing that is language.
That very wise words. Just because you use understandable more commonly understood language does not mean it's dumbing it down. Antonio, you made an excellent point about also what else the industry could do, which is to really be sensitive to local markets. Do you have any other thoughts about what can the industry do a little bit better next year?
I think talk a little more at a lower level, right? Bring it down the level of conversation. Not just, we tend to talk a lot about crypto, about digital assets, right? But not all digital assets were born the same. And we're going to see a lot of standardization, but we're going to see standardization based on asset type, right? So a stable coin is not a MEM, and it's not a utility coin or a security coin or a real world asset or a wrapped coin. And as I joke how when I started working at crypto, my mother just thought that I worked at Bitcoin. Right?
You worked at Bitcoin.
Yes, but with time, she started to understand a little more that I worked at crypto, right? And now she actually knows a few coins. So we need to continue as an industry to foment that knowledge and that understanding of the different coins, because that's at that level that we need to regulate, right? Today, a stable coin is a store value product in most of the US. It's electronic money in Europe. And it's a derivative in some other parts of the globe, right? And then saying, no, that is a product, and it should be looked as much commonly as possible across the different regulations. But we have to have the conversations now at that level, not necessarily at the crypto level.
Yeah, no, that's very valuable. And I'm going to go quickly to Winston before we turn the tables and say what can regulators do better for the industry. But Winston, what can industry do better?
Okay, so just to backtrack quite a bit back, I started my career when email did not exist. So it's a long time ago. Every company at that time had their own intranet. So if I had to send a message to my colleagues in Switzerland, it's an internal email system, right? Couldn't talk to my buddies at JP Morgan but over time, the internet grew. The intranet broke down, and the internet became the common standard. I feel that we're sort of at this point of inflection where everyone's building their own tech, looking at their own ecosystem. These are my clients. This is my product. I'm going to sell it to my 50,000 clients. I'm going to take the world on. I don't think that's possible, right? I think it's time, if we're going to make a change, that someone has to come to the table to hopefully convince people to band together. I think this is important as we flow product that every one of us can use, a bond, a security, an alternative. We shouldn't have to ever figure out that, hey, on that exchange, it's not fungible to exchange B, and then we can't cross-sell or interconnect, right? So I think what is important is that we collaborate more. We have the spirit of taking this forward together. I still believe that a lot of people won't want to work by themselves, be their own island. I think we got to break that down.
Absolutely. Everyone wants their own blockchain. Everyone wants their own token. As nice as that is, guys, we need to figure out how we collaborate. This stuff requires collaboration, so appreciate your words on that. Dr. Pavasant, so I'm going to flip the table and say, as the one regulator on this panel, what can regulators do to help industry, or what do you think are some things that you are doing at SEC Thailand to help support industry as well?
Yes, actually for SEC and particularly in like the innovation thing and the development, we are open for consultation and always open for consultation, because for the regulation, we want our regulation to be proper and practical, while investor protection should be adhered. That's why we have like the sandbox scheme, we have like the consultation scheme, and in Thailand we also have the trade association of the digital asset service provider. Is the group of service provider that we always have like the regular meeting with them, and we can share that what the regulator concern, like the investor protection or the market integrity or the financial stability. But we have to listen to their business, like, and their difficulty, and Yes, today I heard that, there should be harmonization of the international standards. Actually, now there are many international standards, right? Like the SFF that's announced the standard on the AML for the virtual asset service provider. And I also issued the recommendation on the crypto asset and also MiCA for the EU. For that, I think most countries comply with that principle because it's like the general
great.
principle. Yeah, but in detail, I think for some standard are based on the principle base, but there should be more guideline, detail, or example that the industry can comply it like properly, and this can enhance the investor protection and help regulator too.
Thank you very much for that. So in our last few minutes, I'm going to ask somewhat of a tough question. Looking ahead, because basically this is the end of the year already. It's hard to believe. There's Christmas decorations up. I saw it. 2025. What is a particular regulatory concept or area that maybe not getting a lot of attention right now, but will come to a head in 2025? And because I want to participate as well, I will put it out there. I think crypto tax reporting, accounting, people are not talking enough about. And I don't know if you've been following, but countries like Italy and Denmark have just increased crypto tax rates. Tax matters. So I would keep a lookout for that. Over to you, Antonio.
I think a little more attention from the regulator in encouraging and helping the players within the financial service industry to work with each other, so that crypto is no longer pushed to the side or to the corner as a weird child. And be
It's
more
not the
welcome.
weird child anymore. Yes.
No, I still think it's the cool kids, but no.
Yes.
I love your tax point. I think in the United States it's absolutely applicable. We're going to see even more tax guidance and regulation before the end of the year in the United States on DeFi in particular. For me, this night might not be a sort of this is a more obvious answer, but scams and fraud are a huge problem in our ecosystem.
Oh, absolutely.
And we have to really, really leverage the power of the technology to mitigate the risks of scams and fraud. If this industry, if this space is overrun by scams, people are not going to engage with it in a meaningful, lawful way. And it's really, really critical. We run a website called Chain Abuse, chainabuse.com. I'd encourage you guys just to pull it up on your phones. It's a reporting mechanism for folks to report being victims of scams or fraud, to report to law enforcement. I think there are industry and technology solutions to this, but none of this works if we're overrun by these issues.
Can I just leave one point? There's nothing sadder than a local newspaper or local TV ad segment about some person who's been scammed of their entire life savings, and then they use the word crypto, and next thing you know, even if it is a tiny, tiny portion of all crypto, volume out there, that story will stick to the mainstream, and that is what ends up being the stigma. In the industry, we collectively, whoever's in it, need to work together, figure out solutions. Thank you very much for mentioning that. Nilmini.
Well, I agree with all of that, but I will add energy to the mix.
Ooh, energy.
Energy. I worked on energy issues. I spent 12 years on Capitol Hill between the Senate and the House of Representatives, and worked on energy issues. And I just see the energy issues coming up with AI use. It's been a big thing with blockchain use. It's really what attracted me to Hedera, that it uses so little energy. And I think the ownership of energy is, you see big tech starting to invest in nuclear to actually power the AI systems. And who owns the energy, and how does that affect the users of the energy, which includes crypto and people, regular consumers. I think it's going to be a really big issue. Who owns energy?
Dr. Pavasant, what do you think, from your regulator perspective, is a real, if you only had to pick one, it's a major thing on your radar for 2025?
Okay, 2025. I think as a regulator, it's the subtech, right? That now we increasingly use of the technology for the supervision and also for the reg tech, that the industry can comply with that one too. Yeah.
Great. Subtech, still in vogue.
Well, the
Final
focus-
words, Winston.
Focus was for SBI DM in 2025. is to reach out to every buy-side platform out there and band together and come with us on this journey. Let's build the buy-side together. The products are ready. Most of the legal work has been done. Let's start commercializing this. It's been so long, right, talking about STOs. Some people have given up, but let's try something different. Let's band together.
Okay, everyone call Winston after this. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time, and thank you, dear panelists, for your views today.